during this cold snap, but you're going to have plenty of water. That's not going to be the issue.
The only thing, yeah, I think that's right. The only thing I was thinking, and this will be something we talk about, I guess, when it comes to if you lose power in the house.
Yeah.
And if it gets down to 8 degrees or whatever, boy, does that increase your chance of having frozen pipes.
Yep.
So what you might want to consider is actually shutting off the water and leaving those faucets open to kind of drain the pipes. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So that's something that you might consider if you're worried about those pipes a little bit. And hopefully it doesn't get to that point for folks, but that might be somewhat of a concern.
Yeah, usually water's not a big issue here, so I think, probably I'll be okay with the water. And the other thing is, you just fill up water bottles and jugs at your house. You don't need to go to the store and buy it. The faucet works right now. You could start filling up bottles now and save it for the weekend. There's no need to go buy bottled water. Not that your water bill is free, but you pretty much have free water at your house.
You know what it is? It's psychology, right?
Yeah.
As human beings, we feel better when we're doing something. And the act of going and I'm going and doing this and I'm going and buying that's going to make you feel a little bit better. Yeah. Some of those things you really need to buy, but maybe the water might not be one of those.
Yeah. And all the toilet paper, because we know you're probably cold air makes you go to the bathroom all the time, Tim, right? All right, this is the next question.
We saw that during COVID.
Yeah, that was weird. So this one's for me. What's the closest place I could drive from Charlotte on Friday to avoid ice or snow? Wow, that's I'd actually probably recommend south, not north.
Yeah.
I was thinking today, because someone was coming up from Florida, and they asked, when would it get bad as I'm coming to Charlotte? And I was thinking like Columbia, like the Midlands of South Carolina might be the borderline, or maybe coastal South Carolina, Charleston. I would maybe go to Charleston, maybe down there. I think Myrtle Beach might be close, but the nice thing about the ocean this time of year, it's still warm enough to keep the immediate coast a little bit warmer. And so I think I would head south or southeast, not go north, northwest, or northeast.
What's wild is in some of those computer model runs, they actually warm it up a lot at the end of the storm on those. So we'll see if that happens. But I agree with Charleston. Good choice.
Yeah, that would be a good one. It's easy. It's all interstate, too, by the way. All right, so we're running out of time, everybody, but don't go anywhere. We're going to keep the weather coverage rolling here on WCNC Plus and WFMY Plus, and we'll be doing this again every night this week, and you'll probably get sick of seeing us, but we'll keep you informed on this winter storm as we get closer to the weekend. See you later.
All right, everybody, appreciate you being with us here for Live Impact News. I'm Vanessa Rufus. Over the next couple of hours, we'll be talking about your big breaking headlines. Of course, weather will be a big headline, not only tonight, but for the next several days as we here in Charlotte. And really regionally, we're looking towards the weekend and the potential of some pretty nasty impacts from a winter storm. I want to kick things off with what we can expect. Let's go ahead and get to this chat with one of our meteorologists and the National Weather Service, and then we'll go on with more of how we can prepare as we go on through the coming days. Let's take a listen.
So this particular setup is concerning on a number of levels, but one of the primary concerns, I think, will just be that mixed precipitation type, right? And we're talking about the potential for an ice storm in the south.
Absolutely. Yes. One of the unique aspects of this particular storm is just how large the swath is of potential sleet and freezing rain impacts. So it's not just a single low pressure system with snow wrapping around the backside like we would normally see in a typical coastal winter storm. This is a very large swath that extends from the southern plains all the way out to the southeast and mid-Atlantic.
And talk about this setup. Right now we have Arctic air, right, that's getting ready to move in repeatedly over this week. And then what?
Yeah, so step one in the ingredients coming together is actually this really, really cold Arctic air mass. Sub-zero temperatures coming into the upper Midwest. And as that comes down, the front side of that cold air will set up a cold front that drapes across the southern plains into the Mississippi Valley into the southeast. And what that does is it ends up focusing a lot of the lifting for the warm, moist air coming out of the Gulf. And as that rides over the wedge of cold air, that's what's going to give us a really large swath of freezing precipitation.
And I know that there are still a lot of uncertainties with this forecast, but right now, looking like we are talking about a large piece of real estate, right? From Texas all the way to the mid-Atlantic.
Yes. There's a large population that'll be impacted. We'll actually have over 200 million Americans affected by temperatures below 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And so it's a very large swath of the country that will have very cold temperatures. And on top of that, everywhere from Texas out into the Carolinas likely to expect some sort of freezing precipitation impacts. I like to think of it as it just so happens that the I-40 corridor is where we're expecting more of the snow impacts. And then the I-20 corridor just south of there is where we're expecting most of the freezing rain and ice impacts. So that's a good kind of a gauge for, generally speaking, what we're looking at in terms of parts of the country.
And as of now, what does timing look like?
Most of the ingredients will come together for the snow to begin over the southern high plains, Colorado, New Mexico, into Texas. That area typically, we expect to begin around the early part of Friday, and then that'll kickstart a chain effect that will move from west to east. And so we're expecting most of the ice impacts to happen Friday night into the weekend. So we're looking at about a 3-day event, all told, from start to finish, from the southern plains all the way into the southeast.
And large population centers could experience ice, correct? So we're talking about Dallas-Fort Worth, we're talking about potentially Atlanta. Just talk about the concerns there. Anytime here in the South we hear the word ice, it's a panic, right?
Right. And so this is the biggest part of the impacts here for this storm will be how far south it is, combined with the fact that the cold air is so entrenched that not only will areas that aren't used to seeing this type of impact see these levels of impact, but also how long it'll last afterwards. So cities that aren't accustomed to have the infrastructure to be able to clear the snow and ice quickly, unfortunately, in this particular case, we're expecting the conditions to linger for several days, even after the snow and ice has fallen, particularly for areas around Tennessee, Kentucky, and out into the central Appalachians. The deep south will be a little bit better in terms of temperatures rebounding, But as you kind of alluded to, the farther south you go, the larger the impact in terms of areas not being used to these conditions.
And you bring up a good point with that. Normally, oftentimes in the South anyway, when we do get ice, it will warm up quickly after that and melt. However, in this case, with morning lows down in the 20s, that may not happen. So whatever does fall from the sky will freeze.
Exactly. And so the biggest threat for this particular storm might not even be the actual precipitation falling in those moments. It's actually what will come after. Any tree damage that occurs, power lines going down, those effects will likely linger longer because there will be less melting happening immediately after the storm. And that effect will become more magnified the farther north you go where it is colder. So we're expecting places to have up to several days worth of sub-freezing temperatures to end up prolonging the impacts of this.
And how much snow are we talking about, or is it too hard to tell?
Yeah, right now we're still several days out, so it's hard to give specific values. We are seeing the computer model guidance giving us more confidence that over 70–80% chance that most of the swath will get more than 4 inches of snow. There will be isolated areas where they get over a foot. Still too early to pinpoint where that might be, but the confidence is increasing for seeing that much impact. And then on the ice side, about a 1/4 inch of ice accumulation for a good chunk of the swath looks pretty likely.
Which is crippling. You can't travel in a 1/4 of an inch of ice, right?
Exactly.
Power outages
Travel
would
will
be
be
another.
very, very difficult.
And power outages would be another concern, especially with the colder temperatures to follow.
Correct. Power outages, which then can exacerbate other cascading impacts, things like no heat, right? And a lot of the challenges that come with just being in the deep winter, particularly for our friends down south.
Right. So what's the best plan right now for people who are watching? And, a lot of people will tend to panic in these situations, but I would say preparedness is more important than panicking, correct?
Absolutely. And I always like to say that with better science comes better computer models, but it's a bit of a double-edged sword, right? We can see further out into the future, but that doesn't necessarily make us more confident. And so in cases like this, a storm like this, you're hearing about it a lot more on social media, even ahead of official watches and warnings, right? And so
You have to be careful of that.
Right. And so exactly. And so I would encourage everyone, particularly those very plugged into social media, that it's great to see this for awareness, but don't zero in on the numbers just yet. Exact numbers, be very, very cautious of this far out in advance. What I would encourage is for everyone to tune into their local weather forecast office of the National Weather Service. My team behind me here actually just this morning was on a bunch of conference calls. We're already coordinating across the whole country at all levels of the National Weather Service the watch process, trying to figure out when watches would be appropriate for different locations. And the guidelines are different depending on where you are. So areas further south, thresholds may be a little bit lower than areas that are more accustomed to this type of weather, right? And so that's why, unfortunately, for winter weather, it's very difficult to just have one specific definition and go, here, do this, when this happens or is issued. In particular, for this storm, I would encourage everyone to just stay tuned to their local weather service forecast office, and if a watch or a warning is issued, take precautions and take action according to local authorities.
And we'll definitely have updates on this forecast as it develops as we get closer towards the weekend. You heard them talking about numbers and how things will kind of get fine-tuned. That's exactly what we hear from Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich about how at this point, he says we're not worrying about the numbers specifically just because they can change and drastically as well over the course of several days. But you can definitely start to prepare now. Speaking of which, we'll be talking about various ways to get ready, not just yourself, thinking about power outages, thinking about food, whether you're going to be able able to remain in your home. If you have to get on the roads, what does that look like, if absolutely necessary? And also making sure that we're remembering those animals, those pets that might be outdoors, and making sure that we're bringing them in. So stay tuned. We'll have much more for you on that front on the other side of this break. We'll be back in 2 minutes. All right, folks, thanks so much for sticking with us here on Live Impact as we do get you ready for the upcoming weekend and potential winter weather impacts. As Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich has shared, this is a situation that is looking less likely at this point of a large snow event versus ice. Really, ice is kind of taking over the forecast as we see it develop over the last week or so. And unfortunately, that does mean a lot of impacts, particularly when it comes to power outages and safety on the roadways. With that, we want to bring you our sit down with South Carolina DOT, which says that it is starting to prepare as we speak. Let's listen in. All right, folks, we continue to keep you updated on the winter weather impacts coming this weekend. Of course, as we mentioned, our weather impact team is still finessing the forecast as we get closer and closer to the actual weather event. But they're telling us, at least as of today, it is looking more and more likely that we're dealing with primarily an ice event, which we know is not our friend when it comes to power outages, nor is it our friend when it comes to traveling on the roadways. So on that note, we did want to bring in Kelly Moore with South Carolina DOT to talk about how DOT is preparing to meet the need this weekend. Kelly, I can imagine you're probably already have been talking about with your crews all the different roadways you need to hit and how you're going to respond. What are you planning to do leading up to this weekend?
That's exactly right. So the South Carolina Department of Transportation has got crews and equipment staged throughout the state of South Carolina ready to respond. We also have contract crews on standby to come in and reinforce those operations if we need to. We've got crews that are already out pre-treating roadways, especially heavily traveled roadways and bridges that we know could see some of those winter weather impacts this weekend.
Now, I know the big messaging that we've heard from various agencies that do deal with roadways or even first responder agencies is, you know, if we do end up with this big ice event, to not head out on the roadways, not go out if you don't have to. I'm just kind of curious, you know, as folks are preparing to stay at home for potentially a period of time, how quickly are your crews able to get out there and do any additional treatments or response if they do have to do that?
So our crews work before, during, and after the winter weather event. We'll start responding immediately to both treat and plow roads as needed to get them back open quickly. If we see accumulations starting to build up on the roads, we do start with those interstates and primary routes, those heavily traveled routes, to ensure that first responders, critical workers can get to where they need to go. We understand that there are folks that need to travel no matter the condition. We're here and we're working for you and for all of South Carolina as we work to safely restore roadways after we see a winter weather event pass through our area.
Now, I mean, I guess as you kind of mentioned the fact that, yeah, there are some folks who will need to head out. You know, I myself will be part of winter storm coverage this weekend, so I will have to be out to try to come here to work so we can keep people informed. Where do you recommend folks travel if they absolutely have to travel, if it is essential and they just cannot remain at home?
Sure, we appreciate what you do and the other frontline folks who are out there making sure that South Carolinians stay safe. If you do have to travel and there's freezing temperatures or even precipitation coming down, we encourage you to slow down, give some space between you and the other cars on the roadway, and just stay alert as you travel. Travel with caution.
Now, is there any sort of hotline that you might be opening, or is there a certain platform folks can be visiting in order to either report particularly dangerous conditions that they might be seeing and or get updates on the very latest, you know, roadways where maybe you all are seeing this is an area to not be, or any sort of updates from you road-wise?
Yeah, so we encourage folks to download the SC511 app. You can also visit that website, SC511. That gives you real-time travel conditions, including camera views of those interstate and primary routes, so you can see in real time what the conditions look like before you head out. We do have a call center here at SCDOT and a website, and we'll be here to respond throughout the event.
Now, I mean, I know that you're probably dealing with, you know, your own perhaps meteorology team or partnering. I'm not quite sure exactly how your agency might work, but maybe you're even partnering with, you know, emergency management or even meteorologists in various markets to kind of see exactly what the forecast is looking like. Are you hearing anything from within your agency about how serious this could be? Because we are starting to maybe start to get a sense that the urgency is a little bit higher than maybe some of the more recent weather impacts that we've seen on the winter front lately.
You're exactly right. We work very closely with the National Weather Service. We also encourage folks to stay tuned to their local broadcasts like yours to make sure that they're getting the very latest weather updates on the forecast. As we know, forecasts can change and evolve. They can get better or worse, but know that we're preparing for the worst and hoping for the best here at SCDOT.
Anything else you'd like to leave us with before we wrap things up here?
The only thing I always like to remind folks is if you're out traveling on the roadways and you see our crews out working, please give them room to work, slow down. We want everyone to go home safe at the end of the day. Our priority here at DOT is to make sure that people traveling in and around South Carolina get where they need to go safely, and we're here and working for you.
Yeah, I understand, you know, as a former traffic reporter in a different state, you know, move over law was a big thing in Florida when I was a traffic reporter there. Definitely reported on it in North and South Carolina. Any particulars about that move over law you want to share, since you did mention giving your emergency crews or your workers some space?
Sure. With conditions on the roadway, you know, being potentially dangerous over the weekend, please slow down, give those responders extra room to work. If you can move safely, please do so. We know that conditions are potentially going to be changing on our roadways, so understanding that, but asking everyone to just slow down and stay cautious as they travel.
All right. Kelly Moore with South Carolina DOT, we thank you for your time in informing our public here and our viewers. And of course, thank you to your workers as well, who are going to be out doing some really hard work potentially this weekend. So we're really grateful.
Thank you very much.
All right. And folks, we'll take another break here on Live Impact. Back on the other side with the latest. And yes, as past Vanessa just said, we will take another break. We will be back in 2 minutes. We've got much more to talk about, including keeping those pets safe. And we know the typical encouragement we hear during these winter storms about bringing in your indoor pets and in different ways to keep their paws safe with the ice melt and also bundling them up. That is important, and we definitely will touch on that this week. This is about addressing dogs that are actually outdoor dogs whose owners are not bringing them inside during this dangerous period for whatever reason, what you can do to help with that situation. So we'll see you in 2 minutes. All right, welcome back everyone to Live Impact News. We want to turn now to more of your winter weather coverage as we are looking ahead to the weekend and the potential for some pretty nasty impacts, particularly in the form of ice, which we know can cause some issues with power outages and roadway travel, and also can make it difficult for outdoor pets to survive in some cases, sadly, because this is a situation where, you know, any amount of exposure in freezing conditions, that can cause some damage, hypothermia, frostbite, any number of things. So we are actually speaking and hearing from groups who are here in Charlotte trying to make sure that these outdoor dogs who might not get brought inside for whatever reason this weekend still have some safe havens and also some sustenance. So let's go ahead and check in now with my earlier interview with Claire Norris with Two Girls, Lots of Dogs, one of these groups that's trying to help. Two Girls and Lots of Dogs, and we've got Claire Norris with Two Girls, Lots of Dogs joining us right now. We saw that y'all had posted online about this winter supply drive that you're hoping to do for these chain dogs that might be outside, and I just wanted to get, you know, your take on what you feel like the situation could be for some of these pets that are being kept outside this weekend if their owners aren't going to bring them in.
Totally. So what we do at Two Girls, Lots of Dogs, every year we call it Dry January. And I'm sure you've heard of that when it comes to restaurants and going out and that sort of thing. But what we do is provide shelter and straw for the outside dogs that are unable to come inside, or if the owner just doesn't want to bring them inside, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think, you know, once I started getting involved with animal care volunteering and with animal rescue myself as a volunteer, I feel like I was enlightened to the fact that, you know, as pet owners, you know, a pet owner who keeps my dogs inside and, you know, in some cases they're sleeping in the bed with me, or like, you know, they're very cuddly indoors with me. You don't think that there are so many dogs that are being kept outside, but this is a way of life for some folks. And we also know that depending on which jurisdiction you live in or what municipality you live in, there could be varying rules about what is considered to be an acceptable structure for an animal to live in. And I think that's something that,
exactly right.
yeah, I mean, that blew my mind.
Yeah, it's weird because some areas are like there is a tether law and they do such a good job of keeping, that on lock. They don't let dogs be outside on a chain if it's a certain temperature or wind or anything like that. And then some areas it's just like I don't think they've ever heard that word ever. So it's like it really varies. So what we're really going to focus on is kind of the outskirts of Charlotte. And at this time, what you can do if you're inside Charlotte is you can also call and do a welfare check. And we know our animal control and care is fantastic, and they will go and check on the dog and make sure and talk to the owner and educate. But more so in some of the areas that are about an hour outside of Charlotte, more of the country, it's not as doable, I should say.
Yeah, so it sounds like y'all have ideas of, where these dogs might be already. Maybe there's certain properties that you've already been keeping an eye on, maybe even building relationships with the pet owner. And I see now like a list of this drive, how folks can help. We actually prepared a graphic to kind of show some of the things that folks can donate. Walk us through what you're looking for and how these items are set to help with your efforts.
Yeah, so with that, just a PSA, we don't accept blankets right now because blankets will get wet from the snow and then they freeze. And then the dog tries to go in their doghouse and they have like this block of ice. So no blankets at this time, but we accept wood chips, hay, straw. That keeps the doghouse insulated. Doghouses in general, you would not believe how many people think a crate. I'm talking like you can put your fingers in it with holes on the top of it, like an indoor crate works as an outdoor shelter. And sometimes they might throw a piece of wood on the top of it, but that doesn't, if it's sideways raining, that doesn't do anything. So we like to update dog houses when we get a chance. And then food. That's the number one kind of complaint when we are connecting with these owners is, things are more expensive, but their animals are still in need. It's like at the end of the week, they just don't have the money for the dog food. So of course they throw the leftover stuff in the refrigerator, but that's just not enough for 2 meals a day for an animal. So mostly straw, wood chips, anything that can be put in a doghouse to stay insulated, but no blankets, and food and treats. And we do take open bags because I know some of like mine and your dogs, Vanessa, they're spoiled rotten. So they're like, oh, I'm just not going to eat this bag. I don't like this food. So any food, open bags of treats, anything like that, we will accept.
Yeah, I'm thinking too, maybe there are some pet owners out there and, sadly maybe their pet had passed and they do have an open bag of dog food that they didn't get through. I know because I've received such bags of dog food from, friends of mine who said, I can't use this. Can you give this to the shelter? And not every, situation can you accept an open bag of dog food, but I know in a case like this, you're really trying to just make sure that these animals that are out in the cold are getting the sustenance that they need. I did want to ask you too, since it sounds like you have a lot of experience being out there, talking with these owners, seeing the conditions that these dogs are living in. What do you think is, the most surprising type of, scenario that you have seen personally that you think folks need to know just what it's like out there for some of these pets?
Yeah, that's a great question because a lot of times we will post something and we'll get an influx of direct messages and it's like, these people suck, these are the worst. And that's not always the case. And that was something it took me a while to come around to. I've seen dogs be chained up and kiddos be allergic. Well, if the family's struggling to feed the dogs, they don't have money for Claritin every month. I mean, just things like that. You got to think everything costs money. So it's really easy to sit back and judge, but I will say kids in the home with allergies, dogs they never wanted. Like dogs were in a worse situation and the people were trying to help, but maybe some aggression, they don't know how to do it. Not everyone has the resources to get with the trainer, so I just think it's really easy to drive by and be like, oh, they're the worst, take those dogs. But sometimes it's not as black and white, and I think working in the gray is what Two Girls Lots of Dogs we do best, because our main what we push the most is like talk to the owner. Everyone's like, I don't feel safe. Okay, well, I'm 5'2", so like I don't always feel safe, but most of the time if you knock on a door and you say, hey, I got this bag of dog food, Amazon delivered 2 to my house, can your baby eat this? They're not gonna get angry, you know. So we just try to tell people to just be kind. You never know what situation someone is in, and there has been times when we've used that, and then the owners are like, you know, I'm sick, I have a health condition, and I was falling over the dog, and this is I love him or her, but I can't do it anymore. And then we step in as a rescue and, you know, maybe go a different route. But yeah, so the craziest situation I've seen though is just dogs walking onto properties, and the people are like, well, we didn't want them to get hit by a car. So it's like, okay, well that's yeah, you're right. So just don't be so quick to judge, I think, is our best advice and craziest scenario.
Now, we understand that, you know, y'all have also been involved with advocacy, and, you know, I did bring up the whole element of laws and ordinances and, you know, for example, you know, what's legal regarding tethering and what's legal regarding, you know, shelter for a pet. And what do you think folks need to know about that front? And, you know, as it comes to maybe educating themselves, and also if maybe they don't agree with whatever policies they have in place in their city or wherever they live, how do they change that?
That's a great question as well, because a lot of people are like, well, who do I call? Where do I go? So for every, like you said, county, state, it's different. So that would be something you definitely just need to Google and figure out who is involved, who's looking over that. Do you have an animal control? A lot of times it's just calling your normal dispatch in your area and asking, and then staying on social media and seeing when there are like town hall meetings or anything like that. That is something me and Phoebe go to often, is just like listening and hearing those people out. But I will say it's more so a little bit out of Charlotte, and a lot of in those more rural areas, people look at animals as livestock, and that's something I'm really focusing on changing, because livestock usually isn't chained. They have a field to, you know, get the nutrients they need, pigs, cows, that sort of thing. But when you chain a dog to a fence post or a tree, I think it's different than livestock. Now, I don't believe that we should keep cows and donkeys in our home and let them sleep with us like our dogs do, Vanessa, but I do think there needs to be a hard line on like domesticated animals, and that's something that we have to work, you have to work within your area and your local law enforcement and leaders. And the best way to do that is by calling dispatch and seeing when the next meetings are and who do you call about welfare and neglect cases. Is there an animal control in your area?
Yeah. Claire Norris, thank you so much. We appreciate you taking the time to join us here on Live Impact. We'll remind folks this list of winter storm dog supply requests is actually on our website right now, but a quick peek once again. The other thing that we didn't mention, donations via Venmo at Two Girls Lots of Dogs is one way. And we also are hearing from other rescue groups in our area, foster needs, in case they do need to go and, you know, rescue a dog amid the winter conditions. You can find all of that information on our website, WCNC.com. More on this topic, of course, to come. Claire, thank you again. We're going to take a quick break. Back in 2 minutes and we will be back in 2 minutes here, folks, on Live Impact News. We have other headlines that we're following, including, of course, lots of national dialogue about ICE operations, as we're seeing yet another city speaking out about the impacts of these operations. In just a bit, we'll be taking you out to Maine, Portland, Maine, where leaders there just addressed what those operations are looking like for them. We'll be back in 2 minutes. All right, everybody, hope you're doing well. We are coming back here to Live Impact News, of course, always monitoring the very latest with the winter weather that we're expecting to come and impact our region this weekend. Wanted to take some time, though, to talk about national headlines. We do have a lot of dialogue that continues nationally regarding the ICE operations and the aggressive enforcement that we're seeing the Trump administration taking in trying to detain folks. We've got the latest updates coming out of Portland, Maine, where just a couple of hours ago we saw leaders there addressing the impacts of those operations for them. Let's listen into that right now.
This will save me about phone calls. And that was the purpose for calling today's conference. And we also have the superintendent, person of the Board of Education here, if you should. And we also have the superintendent. Predictable and a threat to their families. Collectively and individually, we've done everything we can to assure them and that we believe in their right to be safe. And we've tried to direct resources their way to support their capacity to stay here in Portland. From hybrid education the schools offering, food sustenance, and just getting the rights and responsibilities out to all key parties so they know what to do should they engage a federal officer. I want to underscore one important point. While we respect the law, we challenge the need for a paramilitary approach to the enforcement of federal statutes. Federal immigration law is lawful. Its administration and enforcement is lawful. While we may dispute the basis for those laws as individual citizens, the fact remains, it is federal law. What we've been concerned with as a council is the enforcement tactics that ICE has undertaken in other communities, which to our mind appear to threaten and intimidate populations. If they change the way they do their business, then we can focus on doing our responsibility as citizens and changing policy through our elected officials. So this council doesn't stand apart from our immigrant communities, but we stand with them. As a reminder, the Portland Police Department does not involve itself in the enforcement of civil administrative violations under federal immigration statute. As police officers, if there is a call for support having to do with imminent threat to life or serious bodily injury, no matter who the agency or individual is, we will respond as we would to any one of you calling 911. That is our duty in terms of public safety. I'll interrupt for a moment. Councilor Fournier, you can join us up here. So we received a lot of information from the public that enforcement contacts have occurred in the community, and that has come in the form of text or phone calls or shared videos. So we know they're there. I will remind the public, allow officers to do their work, do not obstruct. The best thing you can do is to be the best possible witness should the facts that come before you are needed by any future investigation or judicial inquiry. All right, if officers are acting with warrant, they are within the law. And this is not the place or the time to challenge that. I want everyone safe. Interrupting law enforcement action is a risk conduct. It may feel appropriate in the moment, but it could lead to outcomes neither party wished upon each other when they began the transaction. So I want to make that clear. I also respect the right to dissent, to protest, to express your misgivings or rejection of current government policy. If all of you decide to do that, our police department has demonstrated an exemplary history in protecting that expression of constitutional right, and we will continue to do so. Before I came out here, someone came in and said, if we did a protest, what would be safe? And I assured him that the Portland Police Department would do its job, as it always has, impartially, professionally. The other concern we had about ICE arriving, and I put it this way as a former member of law enforcement, what Mayor Shaleen and I expect is that federal agencies and their agents will conduct themselves in a professional manner, respect the rule of law, and treat our citizens without the use of provocation. Exercise the restraint that's necessary. These are standards that are not alien to anyone who carries a badge. It's the standard we expect of our municipal police officers, and I hope and pray it's a standard that the director of ICE would exercise against their agents. So, with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Mayor,
Yes?
are you aware that there are a number of businesses in town that have put signs in their windows saying that ICE is not welcome?
I want to allow Councilor Pelletier to address that, because one of the businesses is in his district. Go ahead.
Can you introduce yourself, full name, spelling? I'm Wes Pelletier, Wespelletier. I'm the city councilor in District 2, which is that way. I want to be really clear, this is a war of terror that's being waged on our city by the federal government. We've seen people of all ages getting thrown on the ground and getting thrown into trucks. And in response, people of Portland, business owners, teachers, college kids have formed a network to make sure that we have early warnings and that we are able to get there in time to, at the very least, get a name before someone disappears. We have people delivering groceries to mothers that need diapers, but they're too afraid to leave because they know, correctly, that as soon as they leave, there's going to be 4 guys in the unmarked car outside their driveway that will throw them to the ground and take them, nobody really knows where. While every single abduction that's happened is a wound to Portland, it's been very clear that every single one has underlined just how important immigrants are to our community. They're the backbone of our economy. They are the kids that are getting on school buses. They are the families that go out to eat and make life what it is. And no one asked the federal government to come here. This is one of the safest cities in the country. But because of an agenda of white nationalism and might makes right, we now have a war on our streets. So, what I would ask, I don't expect much from Senator Collins, from the administration, but I would ask that the Democrats, who are supposed to have our backs, grow a little bit of a spine and do what a random mother in any of our neighborhoods is willing to do and take action to abolish ICE. Thanks. I can also answer questions.
Do you have any sense, Mayor, of how many arrests have taken place in the last?
All right, and this is a good point now to take a break here on Live Impact. We'll be back in 2 minutes with more on the other side. Hi, everyone. Hope you're staying well. We are checking in here with some of our bigger national headlines here on Live Impact right now. We've been listening into this press conference with Portland, Maine leadership as they talk about the latest impacts from the ICE operations that are underway right there. We've come to a point where they're in a question and answer session with reporters. We'll take you now to that press conference.
Videos I received to be less than a half dozen. I know ICE has declared there's been 50 in Maine. So it's an open question.
And are you getting any communication from ICE, DHS, anyone in the federal government on this?
No. I mean, but that's a consequence. In years preceding this council being seated, our predecessors passed an ordinance that limits the cooperation of the Portland Police as it applies to the enforcement immigration statutes from the federal level. So if we're not cooperating, I think it's reasonable to anticipate they're not calling. And we're not calling them either, because we're clear about what our mission is to protect the overall public safety, and they have a very discrete, narrow responsibility to enforce immigration law.
What have you heard from the ground? What is happening? How aggressive are they? What is the worst you've heard?
I think I've heard narratives from the ground that suggest real anxiety and fear just with their presence. Councilor Ali, I'll turn to Councilor Ali. He's a mayor pro tem, and he does engage many of our diverse communities in the city for his opinion.
Thank you, Mayor. Come again? My name is Pius, P-I-O-U-S, and my last name is Ali. And what I would say is that people on the ground are organized. I think one of my colleagues have said that earlier. People are afraid. They are scared. People's anxiety have gone up because they don't know what to expect. Imagine you are a parent and you step out to put your kid in a school bus. By the time you turn around, you are surrounded by ICE agents, and they are ready to take you with them. Who is going to take your child when they come back from school? So, because we don't want that to happen in our community, there have been a lot of community groups coming together. We have created different channels where anything that somebody needs, whether it is food or if they want their kids to be put in the school bus on their behalf, there are people on the ground that are going to do that. And I also want to add this. I think if the federal government is looking for anyone in this country, so far as the person engaged the system, the federal government knows how to get that person without intimidation, without unleashing terror on our streets. And I would say that we are here and we are willing to support our community as much as we can within the boundaries of the laws. And we are not going to be intimidated by what is happening on the streets. Thank you.
The Somali community in Minnesota has been a focus of the ICE enforcement happening there. Is that also true in Portland?
Well, I don't know. But based on photos that were published by ICE it seems the case that it's people of color, not necessarily from Somalia, and I'll discuss that in a moment. Any other questions? Yes.
What happens if ICE doesn't comply with the rules, like you said they hope they do, you hope they do? How would the city respond? Obviously, this is something that we saw in Minneapolis, where they're withholding investigative materials.
Well, you can't decide how you're going to cross the bridge till you get there, all right? I think that's important. I don't like to speculate on what's going to happen. As a lawyer, and as lawyers would agree, a cause for action has to be established by conduct. And speaking of conduct, I think Minneapolis was characterized by notable massing of federal agents entering a neighborhood. And I think the narrative of invasion arose from that perspective. What I'm hearing from, and I talked with mayors today in other parts of the state, we're seeing very individualized activity by ICE, a person here, a neighborhood there. Their conduct, at least as it's current in Maine, seems to be focused, which would indicate to me, and this is the speculation, is that they're functioning on the basis of an actual court warrant. So therefore, they've identified a party, they have an address, they know who they're looking for specifically, as opposed to this random show me your papers kind of experience. So by doing so, I don't think we're going to see groupings of agents just patrolling a neighborhood. I think we're going to get individualized reports from families. Like I received one from a mother saying that her son was arrested at a grocer as he came out of work. And I've heard a rumor that a hospital saw some of their staff removed. But it seems like it's more specific. If that's the case, it appears that ICE may have evolved the way in which they want to engage a community for purposes of enforcement. And I appreciate the U.S. Attorney's comments that he was paying attention to the situation and wanted for peaceful transactions by all parties. So we'll see. At the end of the day, we'll see. That's why it's important to document what you witness. In the future, there may be individuals, attorneys, or judicial processes that will need your information. Anything else? Go ahead.
Do you have any message for business owners who are not just posting signs, but, are very fearful about, carrying on doing their businesses? Any reassurances the city can provide that they will be safe and can continue to do commerce?
Well, we want them to do commerce. I mean, one of the meetings I participated with, representatives from the immigrant community, immigrant businesses, and the chamber was to set up a communications channel. We provided them with resources so they'd be clear about their rights and what steps they could take to protect their employees. But it's hard because it's individualized. If they're coming for one specific person, that's going to have a different outcome on the business as opposed to saying, you appear to have hired a number of individuals who may have come from another country. We're going to line them up outside and check their papers. I don't think we're there, to be fair. I think we're in the individualized piece. And just to reinforce about the signs in the window, I mean, last I checked, that is the First Amendment. All right. It may not have been perfectly expressed. It may have not taken the tone and language that some could appreciate, but I think I can't speak to the operation of the mind of the owner of that business, but I think her intent was to display her rejection of adverse ICE activity, especially at her place of business. So, and when we did talk at the chamber, we also talked about business continuity. What happens if the person doesn't come back quickly from the detention, and what the business could do. So we have been talking to a lot of people on this issue. Yes?
What message do you have to the federal government and the president at this time?
I don't know if I'm going to communicate to the president. I'm going to communicate to the U.S. Attorney because he's Maine, we're Maine. And I think he has sent a message that he has a similar expectation that we do about how the federal government will behave as they conduct their lawful duties. I think if the president is to receive a message, let him receive it from our senators and our congresspersons. That's their responsibility, that's their role. And I hope that that would have more impact than the Portland City Council alone, because I think our position is quite clear. In terms of information, I sent out who they arrested, right? Did you all get that? There's some mugshots. All right, let me do some homework with you. I was not afflicted with the idea of becoming a lawyer, but I spent 32 years in law enforcement. So I actually read this. And I went to the photos. The first individual, it says, Mr. Ali is a criminal illegal alien from Sudan, convicted for false imprisonment, aggravated assault, obstructing justice, and the violation of protection order. I think that's meant to frighten you. I think that's meant to infer that this criminal person was free in our community. But you missed the word convicted. He's been convicted. He's been through the process. If so, has he served his sentence? Is he considered now a free person as far as the criminal justice system is concerned? And that's one of their lead arrests. Now, he might be in violation of a civil infraction under the Immigration Code. That's your job. Find out. The next one, Mbessa Bernie, a criminal illegal alien from Ethiopia, convicted for aggravated assault and cocaine possession, and convicted. What's the actual termination of that case? What's its posture? Did he become illegal as a consequence of the conviction, or did he enter this country lawfully, as many?
All right, folks, so there you have it. Portland, Maine leadership talking about the impacts of the ICE operations that are underway in that city. We'll be back in 2 minutes, of course, keeping on the very latest with this winter weather expected this weekend. In about 2 minutes when we return, we'll be talking about the forecast as it stands, plus with power outages, a very large potential for this weekend, what Duke Energy is doing and urging customers to do as well to prepare. All right, folks, we are trying to get you ready for this weekend as we are expecting some potentially pretty gnarly impacts from a winter storm. Our weather impact team queued up this graphic here for you, it really illustrates very well what we can expect. As you note, and probably to a lot of folks' disappointment, we'll probably see here the snow potentials are not as great as what we're seeing for ice. So for folks who are maybe hoping this would be more of a winter wonderland type of weekend, unfortunately it's just really not shaping up to be that for us. And with all of that ice, you can see pretty high risk for icy roadways, which we know is bad for travel, and also power outages as that ice starts to weigh down power lines and limbs on trees, which can then take down power lines. So these are all things that we should be thinking about as we get closer towards Saturday night and Sunday. With that, we did chat with Duke Energy today about how it is preparing and how we should all prepare from a power outage perspective for this weekend.
Ready whenever you are.
All right. Just pop that in there so it doesn't bother anyone. All right.
All right. First and last name spelled for me and your time.
Caroline Fountain, Caroline. Fountain, Fountain, and you can just say spokesperson for Duke Energy.
Awesome. All right, we are preparing for what could be a big winter storm for the area. Obviously, you guys, it looks like last year we interviewed you guys about cold temperatures. This year we're looking at the potential of ice moving in with the system. So how is Duke Energy preparing, and especially for a storm of potentially this magnitude?
Yeah, well, Duke Energy is, do you want me to pause for that? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, that's the only negative thing about the airport.
Right when we start.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Duke Energy is actively preparing for the major winter storm that we're anticipating over the weekend. Right now we have a team of meteorologists that are closely monitoring the weather in order for us to strategically move our crews where they're needed the most.
Obviously, this is looking right now like it'll be an ice storm. It could change, of course, as we get closer and fine-tune the details, but kind of talk to me about how the difference in winter weather and what kind of precipitation we see can impact some of these lines out here for you guys.
Yeah, it's important to keep in mind it really depends on if we're getting snow or ice and how that's going to impact, our ability to avoid outages. So when you think of snow, it takes up to 6 inches of snow in order to impact tree limbs that will then potentially fall on power lines, causing outages, whereas only takes a 1/4 inch of ice to do that same thing. And so that also, keep in mind that when folks are traveling on the roads, if it's snow, it's a lot more easily cleared than it is with ice. And so that's also going to impact the speed in which we can, get out in the field and respond to those outages.
Do you know how many crews you guys are putting out, or kind of
so as you can imagine, everyone is keeping a very close eye on the weather and developments there. And of course, depending on what the things are going to be looking like with the weather, we're going to be adjusting and changing. So we do, as a large utility, we have the ability to move crews from one place to another wherever we're seeing that is going to be the highest impact for our customers.
Yeah. Obviously, we're a couple days away, so we still have a little bit of time. But when we look at this, and I had it right in front of me and then I left it.
You're fine.
Obviously, you guys have kind of talked a little bit about, you and I just spoke about a method that you guys used last year to help reroute some power. Kind of explain.
Folks, you might notice that we just put up this box on the bottom right corner of the screen. This is a live look inside the courtroom.
Duke Energy has a powerful
in
tool
Texas,
called
as we are seeing a jury has reached a verdict in the case of Adrian Gonzalez, that former Uvalde school police officer who's accused of failing to confront a school shooter at Robb Elementary School in May of 2022. We are watching closely to see if that verdict is read soon. We also know there's supposed to be some sort of post-trial press conference. So if that happens here during our live Impact News stream, we will bring that to you live. Meantime, we'll listen in full to Duke Energy preparing for the winter storm
customer outages, which is pretty impactful.
Obviously, we've talked about there are some risks, obviously, with power being out. Obviously, you have people that might need medical care or that have to use that for power. Can you talk to me a little bit about telling people, kind of advising a plan, getting ready and prepared now?
Just like Duke Energy is preparing, we're encouraging our customers to also prepare. If you depend on medical equipment that relies on electricity, find a backup plan for that. And also, having your emergency kit, having things that you need in case there is a temporary power outage.
We also talked a little bit about how to contact you guys. What's the best way to reach out to let you know? I'm sure you guys will have a lot of calls over the time that this is going to be a long storm, potentially. But what is the best way for them to reach out?
There's a lot of different ways that customers can reach out to us to let us know about a temporary power outage. One way, you can call us, you can text us, you can go to our website, duke-energy.com. And you can also download the Duke Energy app and report it right there in the app.
They have some demonstrations here for us on what people should do. Obviously, today is kind of really the day people should start preparing. What are some tips that you have for us?
Yeah, I do have a couple of show and tell items here. So, just like I said, Duke Energy is preparing for this incoming major winter weather, and now is a perfect time in order for our customers to do that as well. So, going around to your windows, to your doors, feeling if there's cold air coming in, go by the hardware store, grab some weather stripping, grab some caulking, take advantage of, now being a relatively cold day, but ahead of the storm in order to seal those cracks and gaps, in order to keep that warm air in so it doesn't, the temperatures don't make your home cold, and also it's going to help avoid extra energy use.
And I was kind of bouncing back to stabbing on the window, but are you guys working longer shifts?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're good. You need...
Yeah, I'm going to need you to...
Yep, just hold it.
Hold up. And,
yeah, you're fine.
Yeah, flip the weather stripping up like you just did.
Like...
Yeah, I'm just trying to... Closer to you.
Like this?
Yeah.
Okay, I got you.
There you go. Do you know how many, and I'll ask you again, but,
let me get you to that.
Like hours people might be...
Okay, like bring it up?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Kind of like hours people might, or you guys work 12-hour shifts, or I don't know if you can go into detail about that or not, or what it's like, but...
Yeah, so, whenever you're ready.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, I'm ready.
No, you're good. How best to say that?
All right, folks, we're going to pivot away here to breaking update. We've got some audio now on this court feed out of Corpus Christi, Texas, as a jury has now reached a verdict in the case of Adrian Gonzalez, the former Uvalde school police officer accused of failing to confront the school shooter there. Let's listen in.
All right, your cause number 25 FC 0001U, the state of Texas versus Adrian Gonzalez. In each of the 29 counts, we, the jury, find the defendant, Adrian Gonzalez, not guilty. Let me see it. All right, members of the jury, I want to thank each and every one of you for your close attention and your patience and being with us timely throughout this trial. I know it was not easy for you. I know everybody was drafted, nobody volunteered. It was a long endeavor, and I want to thank each and every one of you for being here. I'm going to ask you one more time to go with the bailiff to the jury room, and we'll release you from back there. But thank each and every one of you, and would everyone rise for the jury to be excused. All right, Mr. Gonzalez, you were acquitted by the jury. Your lawyers could talk to you more about this, but you do have the opportunity within a timely manner to file for that expunction. They will tell you further about that, but it's incumbent on me to tell you that immediately after the verdict is returned. All right, we're in recess. Thank you very much.
All right, and embraces there with that former police officer from Uvalde School, Adrian Gonzalez. It looks like embracing his legal representation there, his attorneys. As you just heard, he has been acquitted on all of his charges. You remember he came into question following that Robb Elementary School shooting back in May of 2022, when he was charged with 29 counts of child endangerment and abandonment in connection with the shooting that left 19 children and 2 teachers dead. He was facing potentially 6 months to 2 years in jail and a fine of up to $10,000 for each count. But as you heard there, the judge reading the verdict found not guilty on all counts, so all 29 counts. And there is going to be, what we understand, a post-trial press conference in just moments. We're watching a separate feed where we imagine in the next several moments, those attorneys, possibly even the prosecution, we don't know, will come to some sort of podium outside the courthouse and address reporters there with their reactions to this decision. But essentially what we saw at the crux of the accusations against him, questions over how much he did or did not do to stop the shooting while it was underway there inside Robb Elementary School. We also know there were a lot of other questions about police response in general, as hundreds of police we know rushed to the school to respond following calls for help. It took them 77 minutes for them to confront and kill the shooter, and lots of investigations have looked into that. So once again, we are seeing former Uvalde School police officer Adrian Gonzalez acquitted on all counts that he was facing of child endangerment or abandonment, of a consequence that we did not necessarily see in other cases. In fact, in 2024, you might remember that former Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District Police Chief Pete Arredondo was indicted on criminal charges because of delayed response. Arredondo has pleaded not guilty, still waiting for a trial in that. But essentially, we are seeing in this specific case, those charges not going through. So with that, folks, we're going to await this press conference that's coming potentially any minute now. We'll bring that to you if it happens here live within the next 15 minutes or so while we're on the air with Live Impact. Otherwise, we will have this for you for the news at 11 here on WCNC+. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back in 2 minutes. All right, welcome back, everyone, to Live Impact News. We want to turn now to some national headlines. We've got, of course, a lot of dialogue happening in Congress. One of the big topics we continue to see bubble up to the top here, healthcare costs. We've got House Democrats addressing folks tonight, talking about the concerns that they see with healthcare costs right now. And of course, this all coming on the big backdrop of that big push that they have to try to extend these ACA subsidies. And this is something that obviously we reported here on WCNC Plus. They expired at the beginning of the year, and Democrats have been pushing to get these basically put back into place. Let's listen in right now.
Administration, and it's clear Americans are worse off today with Donald Trump and Republicans' leadership. And while it's nearly impossible to measure all of the damage done by the Trump administration, there are a few new lows hit as the nation deserves extra attention. In 2025, American families paid $310 more on groceries and $1,625 more overall compared to 2024, thanks to Donald Trump's tariffs. On top of that, more than 1 million people were laid off last year, the most since the 2020 pandemic, making it even harder for Americans to find good-paying jobs to make ends meet. And their signature achievement and their signature legislative accomplishment, what Republicans tout all the time, was the single largest cut to health care in our nation's history, all in order to give corporations already making record profits additional money and permanent tax cuts. 1 year in, the American people want to know when Donald Trump will finally put their needs first. And I wish we could say that the worst was behind us. But in this Trump cruel and chaotic administration, they have continued to double and triple down on the policies that are wrecking this economy and hurting hardworking families. Even as Donald Trump focuses his attention on other countries, Republicans here at home have the opportunity to do something. They have an opportunity to lower costs that people face, and they continue to choose not to. Before the Senate right now is an extension of the Affordable Care Act, tax credits. Millions of families rely on this for their health care and will see their premiums skyrocket, and have seen their premiums skyrocket as a result of Republican inaction. We won't stop fighting until we get this done. Vice Chair Ted Lieu.
Thank you, Chairman Aguilar. Donald Trump has been in office now for a little over a year, and the results are clear. He has made America more expensive, and people are worse off now than they were a year ago. Healthcare costs are up, grocery prices are up, utility costs are up, and what does Donald Trump focus on? Greenland. I am pleased that he did say at Davos that he would not use military force to acquire Greenland, and that's because any order from the president to invade Greenland without congressional authorization would be in legal order. I also had the opportunity to go to Minnesota for the Democratic hearing on the abuses of ICE, and we heard from local law enforcement, we heard from nonprofit organizations, we heard from ordinary Americans, and some of their stories are horrific. ICE has been engaging in what appear to be clear violations of federal law. We heard that there was a detention center where they have an entire section marked U.S. citizens. That is mind-blowing. ICE enforces immigration laws, not laws against U.S. citizens, and yet there are numerous stories of U.S. citizens being detained, being abused, being assaulted. And I want to say this. The American people have the First Amendment right to observe ICE operations. The American people have the First Amendment right to peacefully photograph ICE operations. The American people have the First Amendment right to peacefully film and live stream ICE operations. Donald Trump has sent ICE across the country to try and intimidate people and communities in various states, and the people of Minnesota said, no, we're not going to take it. We will not yield. We will not bend the knee. And every time ICE engages in what appears to be abuse, more Minnesota.
All right, folks, and we will return back to this address in just a few moments. We do have to take a quick break, though. We'll be back in 2. All right, folks, getting back here to House Democrats making remarks on health care costs. And most recently, we did hear some mentions of President Trump's recent push here that's been ramping up in wanting to acquire Greenland. Let's listen into reactions to that.
Of reactions, more Minnesotans show up and observe, film, and live stream ICE. And this is so important because the evidence that is being gathered can be used in future years. And while this administration might not prosecute ICE officers or Border Patrol officers for violating federal law, a future administration can do so. The statute of limitations for most federal crimes is 5 years. And so to the people of Minnesota and people across this country, exercise your First Amendment rights.
Thank you, Vice Chair Luke. Questions? Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Told that the DHS bill was made a discussion point in the caucus this morning. Did you come up with a consensus of the caucus? Reach a consensus on where members will be on the bill or get any position that members will vote their conscience over their district?
Members are always, their responsibility is to always vote your district. But what we heard from caucus was a presentation from Rosa DeLauro, ranking member of the full committee of appropriations, as well as ranking member Hannah Cuellar, the subcommittee ranking member. I can appreciate some of the work that went into the bill, some of the additional pieces that they were able to place in bill language. I also understand that with a continuing resolution, ICE would likely have more flexibility. But what we heard overwhelmingly was our members, and in the last 24 hours, we've heard our members speak loudly that ICE isn't doing enough. These reforms aren't enough. Their lawlessness has to stop. And they are only doing this because they can. And only doing this because the President of the United States wants to use them to terrorize communities, to terrorize U.S. citizens, as the Vice Chair heard directly last week in Minneapolis, St. Paul, to scare people. There are kids throughout this nation who are not going to school because they're afraid. They're afraid that they're going to get picked up. They're afraid that their family member who is taking them to school will be picked up. That's just wrong. There aren't enough guardrails within this bill. I can still appreciate the work that went into the bill.
All right, folks, and our time here on Live Impact has come to a close. We will see you for the news at 11 here on WCNC Plus, and we'll turn you over to our next hour of programming. Stay well.